All right, welcome back to Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. I'm your host, Chad Everett Brochures. This is Chat with Chad, and I'm here with William, or Will. And I'll have Will introduce himself a little bit to kind of give people an idea about why, he was a great person for Chat with Chad. So, Will, go ahead.
So you kind of put me on the spot there, but that's cool. No, that's okay. I'm just an ordinary guy that grew up in a separated marriage with my family, my mother and my father, and that presented some adversities in my life, and I went through a rougher path in my later teens. Decided to drop out of high school, got in trouble with the law, a few times. We'll just say a few times, and I was forced to change or become a part of the system, which is the system in which people are incarcerated and such things like that, probation, etc. So I was presented with some opportunity to change some behaviors and habits. So I got into fitness and decided that I wanted to help people in exchange for, I wanted to help people. It felt like a good way out of that. And sure enough, it was. Helping people is a pleasure. So I then became to, do personal training full time for 5 years. And I wrote some ebooks. I wrote 4 ebooks online. I'm not going to plug them because I wrote them when I was 23, and I don't suggest reading them.
Okay. Practice.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a time filler. I got injured working out, so I wrote some ebooks, and I even started a YouTube channel just to explore avenues and just kind of get myself out there and get out of my comfort zone. And so fast forward now, I transitioned out of my personal training career for no particular reason other than curiosity. I was in love with what I did, and I was passionate about helping people, still am passionate about helping people. And I was presented with an opportunity to work on an organic farm in the Blue Ridge Mountains and make $50 a week for a few months, and just kind of strip my persona in a sense that I created for the past 5 years that helped me out of a really dark spot. So I put myself through the ringer again in a sense to learn more and search for depth and meaning, and here we are now.
Interesting. So what's your YouTube channel? Do you mind plugging it?
I'll plug it, but I haven't not done YouTube in some odd years. It's called Faith into Fitness, because at that very time in my life, I had a lot of faith into my fitness, and a lot of people were like, well, is there religious? And I was just like, that kind of wasn't the goal, but it's whatever you want it to be. That's fine. But, I haven't made a video in some odd years, and I'm happy with saying that. And it's still there if you want to look at some videos called Faith Space into Space Fitness. Oftentimes I look back on it and I laugh because it was a opportunity for me to get out of my comfort zone and do something that I was not used to, such as what you're doing, Chad, with this podcast,
Yeah. I think it's really interesting is that, so people have it in their mind when they're young, and even as we kind of transition through life, as if we kind of know what we're doing. We spend a lot of time and we're like, you know what, I'm going to be an astronaut when I grow up. And then you quickly change into another role or you pursue it. But what I also find is interesting is so as you said, you got into a few things. How old are you, Will?
I just turned 29 last month.
Okay. So you're still relatively young overall. All right. So, you're still finding the 20s is a marked timeline for a lot of us to figure out at least our identity, not necessarily our career, but our identity. You know, because like when you go to college, you know, you go to college, you're finding your identity in college. If you
100%.
go to the trades, you're finding your identity in the trades. But career-wise, it's not uncommon to change it. Hell, I even spent 9.5 years in the electrical industry working in a power plant and
Wow.
operations. So
Dang.
I know what it takes to generate electricity. I love the job for it being, you know, very complex and there's layers and layers, and you have to have a deep enough understanding, an intimate understanding of how the plant works in order to predict the safest avenue possible for yourself and the people around you, and
Wow.
still produce a result that you really don't see, but that result can kill you in a second and also
Right.
around you. And that's just the electricity element. Steam itself at that level that's necessary in order to produce electricity and turn turbines, it can't be wet steam. It's clear. Now, the best way to
Yep.
identify it is you hear it, and then you have to use a rag on a stick. To give an example, right? You don't want to touch it because if you touch it, it will cut that part of your body off of you. And it
Jeez.
will, and it's very possible for it to completely cut you in half, every bit of you. So
Good.
it's what I liked about the job is that it made you be present and it made you think very complexly in a complexity. Sorry, making up words over here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the grand scheme of it all. It's
No,
words.
I hear you.
Anyway. But the point is that I spent 9.5 years of my 20s working in the industry, and it was I'm not upset about any of it. No, I didn't go to college at that time. I went into the trades and I went into the industry. And then people go through different things. Like you said, you went through, you know, you got in trouble, right? You had a home that had divorced parents or separated parents. And
Right.
whichever, like, it still created a dynamic where no longer were the parents agreeing to raise you together, they were raising you separately.
Right.
Now, however they made that agreement, they'd still do it, whatever it was. But the outcome was, I mean, you probably acted out a bit to for a
Oh,
change,
for sure.
or the borders, the barriers weren't in place, whatever it might be. So
100%.
the things that I find that are really fascinating is like you didn't start, you know, you didn't make up your mind in your, you know, somewhere in your teen years that you were going to be a troublemaker, right? It
Just
kind of situationally occurred, possibly.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's spot on. I never was just like, you know what, I am going to do this. Like, I counted just recently, my girlfriend asked me, how many times have you moved in your life? And I counted 25 times.
Oh, wow.
25 times. And I, some people experience more, some people experience less. But it made me realize that when I would change schools so often, that the only thing that I yearned for was connection
Mm,
and to belong somewhere and to fit in somewhere, because growing up your whole life when you're stripped away from like friend groups that you feel like you belong somewhere, and to go somewhere else completely different where you and what your normal state was accepted, you go to a new state and you're just like, oh, who's this strange weird new guy, you know?
mm,
So to have to adapt and change and continuously do that, you almost it was crazy, you know. But it was normal for us. So I say it's crazy now because I'm aware of the situation. But as a kid, it was totally normal for me. So yeah, acting out was a little bit of a, uh, you know, an outcome of that for sure.
yeah. And what I find is also interesting is that most people that have had stability for some time have people with an expectation of a character, like the attributes your character is defining you by. So
Yep.
you go into these, like, say, like, so with me, I didn't really move a lot in my teen years. So the friends that I had knew me for who I was and maybe I made new friends in the school year turning over, but I didn't go into a full blown, you're now at a new school or you're now in a new environment, that made me have to use some of those character traits that were a little more, not necessarily outlandish, but more of the acting out kind of things, where perhaps you
Sure.
took different risks that made you look like the rebel or the comedian, or, you know, the accentuated elements about you that brought a lot of attention, and use
Right.
those as a mechanism to get people to put attention on you in a way that made them want to be friends with you, because you weren't
Exactly.
about when the next like when the next move was, but you wanted to feel like a belonging, you know,
Yeah.
which made you bring those character traits out, which it wasn't the whole of you, but the rewarded side of you, which was,
Right.
you
It's
know,
fascinating. This is why I agreed to do this podcast, because the way you think about things is on a completely different level than than the way I think. And when you say stuff like that, it's really reaffirming. It's like, oh wow, spot on. Maybe I wasn't conscious of it before, but now I see. And luckily I've been able to navigate through these situations and say, oh, this was not right. But sometimes there's these not fully formed conscious thoughts,
mm,
like what you just said, and you can be like, wow, that makes perfect sense, spot on.
yeah. Well, it's kind of we live in it, right? Versus like, because it's kind of like explaining to a fish that it's in water. Like when it's occurring, it's like, what are you talking about? Like I'm obviously not in whatever the hell that thing is until
Right.
you're removed from it. Then you're like, oh, okay. But my greater point of it is that what it does is it creates and it illustrates like who William is in the world.
Right.
Kind of, it's for me, like I'm going with the outlook that I have on it, but I'm not saying that it's 100% accurate. It's up to
Sure.
you to understand how accurate it is and to
Makes sense.
give me,
Makes total sense.
am I on the right, am I on the right avenue? Or are we on a highway of getting to know each other? Or are we just kind of like navigating through, the wilderness? And
Yeah.
it kind of, what I like about this type of conversational approach to living is it creates an intimate degree of knowing ourself and the people we're involved with. And it gives a degree of compassion and forgiveness for what we'll perceive as a slight, or some
Mhm.
sort of upset, where
Right.
we could stay for a second and be like, yeah, that person, may have been pretty upset with me or poised to produce violence or something, or made a statement that seemed to be off color towards me. But the
Right.
reality is that they're trying to make it through life just as we are, but they're a combination of all of these experiences balled into that person that we're seeing the surface. We're bringing our current condition, how we feel physically at that moment. Are you tired, cold, hot? Are you emotionally drained, emotionally excited? Are you in a state of happiness? Are you in a state
Right.
of sorrow? Are you having are you projecting the possibility of a fight with your partner? Are you
Mhm.
dissatisfied with the decisions that you've made that left you in the job that you're in, or
Right.
the current situation where perhaps you've bought more than your finances allows and you're stressing financially, and then boom, you have little control over this person entering into the space that you're occupying,
Right.
even if it's the 6 feet, 3 feet, or 30 feet. You have different variations of threat level for the distance. And if the person's 30 feet away, but they make a glance your way and you're having an insecure moment with your partner, and you're like, well, that mother is looking at my girl, or whoever your partner is, right? And you're like, threat immediately. And you've made up your mind about
Exactly.
this person. And we've
You know,
immediately
I
taken all the forgivenesses that we beg for, we plead for, we feel as if there's an entitled position for those forgivenesses, but yet we immediately say, not for that person.
yeah. That's so hilarious. Man, even just recently, even just recently, um, my so I'll just cut out the unneeded details. Recently, there was this new person that moved across the street from where I conduct work and just kind of have this bubble in a sense. And in that bubble, there's all these other people that I do know and I'm familiar with. This new person comes in and he has a totally different way of interacting and bantering and connecting with somebody, which to me at first felt like disrespectful.
Mm.
But it's not the case. A lot of times those are just all internal battles that you're feeling. And I got to a point where I was analyzing and I'm like, why do I care so much? Why do I care so much? And I was asking questions of friends, and I was like, because I feel threatened in a sense, you know? And then once I realized that there was actually no threat whatsoever, I put my guard down. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I really don't. I don't care. I don't care what he's thinking. I don't care what he's thinking about me. I don't care what I'm doing. If he says a joke, I'm willing to laugh at it. If it's directed towards me, I'm totally subjective to what he has to say. And I just let my guard down. I say, you know what? Is this person really out to get me? Most of the time, it is not. Most of the time, it's not. You know?
Well, also, you're in what has been referred to, and I believe it's through the Ayurvedics, as in the lion phase. And the lion phase of life is a lot of it is you're defining who you are as a person.
Right.
Through that definition of who you're becoming or who you're recognizing yourself to be, you're practicing and trying on a lot of different character attributes. Even if it's not
Right.
necessarily externalized, you're internalizing them. Perhaps maybe if I'm funnier, I'll get my way a little more often or whatever. But, and you're also in that territorial phase. And some people won't leave that phase.
Right.
Like, this is mine. So and you know, one of the things that I'd like to go over with you is where I see the ego in its maturity phases. And
Yeah.
that'll be
And I'd
something we
love
can
to talk about that. You
um,
know, I think that's a little about why we got into a conversation on it to begin with, which is great.
yeah,
Um,
and appreciate that your willingness to explore that, because it's
oh,
often we spend so much time defining this thing and creating a scapegoat concept of our subconscious behaviors.
yep.
And the crying out for our protection of ourselves.
Mhm.
And I'll get into that in just a second because it's one of them.
Sure.
I've had that conversation many times over the last 10 years. And
Right.
I've had disagreements with a lot of the people that are on the spiritual enlightenment phases, because I come from the sciences and the psychology of it and
Sure.
the evolutionary values. And
Right.
sometimes it's like one person jumps so far into the esoteric and the
Yeah.
concept that they don't have enough rooted value to give forgiveness, but they layer over with optimism and this like pleasantry of inauthenticity, which is
Right.
it,
See it
it's
all the time.
good. And the reality is, it's like, like you'd mentioned, you may laugh when this person gives a joke if he's directing it at you, but do you genuinely find the joke funny, or are you using that as a comforting mechanism to have them feel like their attempt landed in a way that you're allowing them to get closer and reducing the territorial behavior? So,
Fair. Love that way of looking at it. And it's so funny. So there was a lot of unconscious things going on at first. A lot of like aspects of myself that I am currently uh, in midst of refining, so to speak. And I was presented with this perfect opportunity. It's like, all right, well, let's see how much work you've really been doing. So, there was a couple weeks, and we both were like didn't understand each other, and it was weird and it was awkward. And I could have done exactly what you said, where I was just like, oh well, let me just laugh at it, just so we can neutralize things and just like coexist and be like, hey, you're my buddy now. But what happened was, and it was an opportunity where there was drinks flowing and it was saying, and he decided to use me as the butt of his jokes, and around people where in a space where that doesn't usually happen. So I had this reaction where I was just like, if it was funny, I would laugh. And it was really funny, I would laugh. But it felt more of like this like tenseness, of this tensity of like what is he getting at here? Does he have a problem with me? Uh, does he feel threatened by me? A lot of questions, a lot of conflicts going on. So I allow the night to pass. We end up hugging at the end of the night. There's no problems. Nothing escalated, of course. And then he goes away for a couple weeks, and uh, we get back, and I'm just like, during that time, I was like, I don't give a shit. I really don't. I don't care, and I know this person means well. I mean well, and at the end of the day, if a joke misfires and it's like it's offensive, that is totally an internal thing, you know, most of the time. So I've got to this conscious place where I was just like, okay, there's no threat here. It's all good, you know, which is like, it's like that most of the time anyways. So, but yeah.
What I also find that's interesting is that we also like to battle our nature versus fully understanding our nature. So like, why would you want to be territorial?
It's not a, exactly. It's a very like disturbing feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But
Why
you'll
would
have a
you?
reason. You do have a reason for it. Now,
Right.
but it could be so far from your consciousness because it's your nature. No, it's
Exactly.
us. It's our nature to hold a degree of territorialism. You know, we want to have our peace, right? We want to have our land. We want to have our environment. We want to have predictability in our environment. And when there's a element that you don't know well enough, the mystery creates the anxiety. And then
Right.
the anxiety is present and it's present long enough, the stress sets in to the point where it's no longer a low level frustration or an acknowledgeable concern. It becomes like a tangible concern, something that,
Right.
well, it's, you bumped into me, and it
Yeah.
becomes a thing, right?
What the heck, bro?
But we
No.
we do have reason for it. And that's one of the things that I find that a lot of times because we don't level out our true self, the authenticity of us, right? The sincerity of who we are, we'll play a game of trying to figure the other person out as almost as if it's a character trait chess game. So trying to figure out how we fit with the other person. And
Exactly.
it makes you think you have better control over the way somebody else experiences you. But if you ever realize by talking to somebody that they experience you different than your intention, you're like, I never wanted to come across as like a liar. And the reason why you may have come across like a liar is, first off, insincerity smells. It has a putrid type of, or a concerning type of essence about it.
Right.
Where we're like, ugh. And
Yeah,
you
exactly.
may not physically express yourself that way, but you feel it, and it leaves you
You know,
with, go ahead.
it's funny. I learned that when I was in sales, working with you actually, and it was like, if you come across genuine, people are a lot more likely to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Like, desperation reeks,
Mm-hmm.
insincerity reeks, inauthenticity reeks.
Nobody wants to feel like they were gotten. Like, everybody wants to be gotten, like in the sense of like you realizing who I am, and I want you to know that. But nobody
Exactly.
wants to feel like they've been sold, or they were gotten. And
Right.
that, and it seems like a play on words that are a little confusing, but you want to be known, but you don't want to be taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
when you come across insincere or ingenuous, you will come across as somebody who's trying to get one over. And it makes it feel like somebody's looting your resources. So that's why you may come across, because the perception of lying is a very, very interesting thing. The perception of lying could be you are 100% genuine. You're absolutely honest about it. But
Yeah.
you did not connect with the other person. So that person was left with the attachment they have by the expectation of knowing you, or whatever the situation is you're involved in. I got a little acknowledgement over here. I just had to drop off.
I did. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Thanks, Zoom. But we won't connect with the person to understand where they're perceiving us. Either we don't know them well enough, we haven't known them long enough, or it could simply be that we just didn't bother to get to know them. So when they experience us and our genuine honesty, because we didn't take the steps to know them, they
Exactly.
us as lying because we didn't know their attachment. But the words we exchanged were vague enough or non-descriptive enough, even though you feel like you were well defined in your language.
Right. And non-committal enough.
Perceived it differently. And
Right.
them going, you're dishonest. And you're like, well, no, I'm not. Like this fight ensues, or this conversation, because you didn't take the time to know that about the other person, and they didn't take the time to know that about you. But if you play the game that they're wrong, they didn't, but you know better, you're the one that's in the wrong, not them.
Here's a great question
Yeah.
for people viewing this. How do you avoid that? How do you avoid that? How do you avoid that before you're faced with that situation? You have no idea consciously what is going on. In a very simple way, how do you avoid that in the future? Do you just like go swinging out the gate with questions about the person? Or, yeah, I'd like to hear your take on it.
So I always level it out. Now in my adult life, I level it out. I've been doing this throughout my 30s, and now that I'm in my 40s. So what I would do is like, William, you're new. I've been here for a bit, but I also want to make sure that you're as welcomed as I can possibly make it. With that, I'm excited to get to know you, but at the same time, I want you to know how open I am to help. Now, there's a lot of ways that we can take this approach. It's up to you, whatever's going to work best for you. Do you have a moment to really sit down and have a conversation? Is it okay with you that we do? Is it uncomfortable that we have this conversation? Like, you feel it out with the person.
Sure.
So, William, how does it feel for you? Like, I know that you're new here, and I know personally from my experience of coming into an area where I'm new, it's a little unsettling, and I want to get my bearings. Do you want to take some time to get your bearings, or you open to have coffee with me real quick, or grab a drink or whatever?
Right.
And
Yeah.
we can go and just have a real mature conversation. Are you good with it?
Sure.
Which would you prefer? Do you want to have a few minutes to kind of settle in, or do you want to go grab a drink?
Right. Right. No, that's a great, straightforward approach. And I really dig that because it's not really something that I've ever been open to. I'm more of the kind of person at this point in my life where I'm like, if I get to know them, cool. If not, no big deal. Like, no
Mhm.
losses. And that might come off as threatening to somebody. Well, do they respect me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just never know someone's intentions. Are you here to stay? Are you going? Are you leaving? What's the situation? So it's really a chess game between figuring out all these different answers of, are you going? Are you staying? Are you leaving?
Mhm.
Are you going to be here for 2 months? Are you not? And so, and there's a lot of questions too. And sometimes those questions don't need to be verbalized, but if they are, no harm done. If they say no, cool, no big deal. You move on and you keep doing your thing.
Well, this conversation is going to make it so that it's a little strange at first, because it's
Yeah,
not a
exactly.
common practice. But as you get used to it, it becomes easier to do because you become familiar with it. Because right
Right.
now, you're describing you're in your head. You're not in the game. You're in the stadium watching the game being played and figuring out when you're going to jump in and just
Yeah.
surprise everybody and show that you are the hero of the game, right?
Right.
Where you play your role that is whatever your narrative role is. So it does take something. If you think about it from back in like some people still do this, but it's really uncommon or it's rare by comparison to what it was back in the 70s and the 60s, where bring over a casserole to a new neighbor,
Yeah.
giving them a welcoming present. Like, I know you just moved into the neighborhood. I wanted to welcome you. I'm here to help as much as I can. I do, I get a little busy at times, but if there's anything you need help with, yeah, I've got tools you can borrow if you need it. I want you to feel welcome in the neighborhood. And by the way, we made you something to eat. Yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
what better way of being able to quickly break those barriers and be able to immediately connect with somebody? It's like
It's
if the
funny.
invitation is made, you don't have to have the expectation they take you up on any of it, but the invitation has been made, and be
Right.
ready to
You know,
support where the otherwise it's like, wow, you're shallow and you're just not a person of your word if you don't live up to the offer. So it's very similar in getting to know people you just aren't familiar with yet.
dude, boom. Period. Pause. We're gonna edit this part out. I gotta pee so bad, dude. I gotta pee so bad, dude.
All
You'll
right.
know. You'll know it when you see it. So just give me a second. I gotta tell you a funny story when I get back to it.
Oh God.
Right. You know, it's so funny. I spent so much time in my life worrying about what other people thought and how to fit in and what people are thinking, that I've gotten to this point in my life where I almost don't really care. But subconsciously, I will find myself in a state where I'm like, what are they thinking? What do they think about me? Yada, 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 yada. And once I break that pattern consciously, and I've done it over and over and over again since, 8 years ago, I realized, oh man, your past is going to keep creeping up on you for the rest of your life. And that was one of the things that inspired us to have this podcast to begin with, was the painful path to refinement, and how the painful path to refinement, and we could go off on that. But to me, the painful path of refinement is about recognizing when you are wrong to whatever you feel like degree that you're wrong, and admitting it and saying, okay, cool. Let's learn from that situation. Let's move forward. And if I've hurt anybody, let me apologize with deep sincerity and empathy, so that I don't come across to that person like I do not care about them. And in the past 3 years, that has been something that I've been coming back to, is a place of deep empathy and trying my very best to just be thoughtful about how I'm interacting with people. And when you come across people that don't you don't feel like value it as much, that can come off as a threat as well. And then you got to say, that's here's another conscious thought moving forward: is, do I play into that with them, or do I not, and say it's cool if they don't care about that, that's fine. So yeah, the painful path to refinement, man, it's one of those things where you will it is, there's no clear answers. It's just it's a process that happens, and you have all these opportunities in your day-to-day life to recognize and learn a lesson, even through the smallest interactions, even down to the littlest things, like your dog making noises. Is like, is this a test of my patience? Like, literally, my dog literally was just barking at a bear that was up on the hill. And I'm like, what is my dog barking about, man? You know? And I got up, and then my neighbor was like, hey, Will, there's a bear. And I'm like, good boy, thank you.
Yeah.
So I feel like the path to refinement is for me personally right now, is just about being aware of what's going on in my mental landscape, and being able to refine that at any moment, period.
Yeah. What I love about it is, where you are is exactly as the definition, or the way of describing the lion. Now, as you are continuously discovering yourself and the environment that you're living in. And it is an interesting thing that is just, it supersedes us individually, because it's a pattern of behavior that human beings have exhibited for such a time period, that it shows up in writing that is, damn near, prehistoric. It's like in cave writings and stuff like that. So it's a really fascinating thing to see that we go through these different phases, and we all do. It's just some people get stifled in their process. Like I have the Ascending to Total Maturity, the maturity program that I've been working on, that outlines 8 different areas of maturity. If your parent or somebody interjects at an earlier stage of your life, when you're experimenting in that area of maturity that you were developing in, and they stifle it by, ridiculing or reducing the safe space that you need, or the safety to experiment in that area, like a child breaking an egg in front of the refrigerator, pulls it out, and it's looking at it, and it's assessing the egg, and then it taps it, and then all of a sudden it slips out of their hands, the whoopsie, and then they realize the egg breaks. It's a solid feeling item, and then it's fragile, and it just, a child, it blows their mind. It's not, it's
Yeah.
it's leaving the whole, like, it's it's challenging object permanency.
Right.
Because that's where we're at in that phase typically where,
Yeah.
where to go and object permanency, right? It's like, go on, I can't see you, you can't be there,
Yeah.
but but when that gets interfered on, it affects our development. And so we will be dealing with, like when you're dealing with somebody who's upset about something or acting out, what you may not know is that that person may be acting like an 8-year-old, or you can assess the maturity by the way they're acting. You're like, oh, that's acting like a damn teenager, and you're 40, right? But that could very well be because somebody stopped their growth.
At that period in their life, at that time.
You may be experimenting with relationships, and somebody emotionally hurt you, which is almost certainly going to happen at some point in time in somebody's life, right?
Absolutely.
Because of our attachment to the idea.
Sure.
So you may be, you know what? I'm going to open myself up completely to you. And this is the first time in my life that I've gone that level with somebody else, but combining the attraction with that person. Like I see you in such a way that I want to see you long-term with me. And, I'm going to share this with you almost as if that's an investment statement versus a present statement. So when you put that investment that is superseding your relationship with that person, you have an attachment that thing becomes realized. And then the person says, well, I'm not really into that. Never really was. And then the next thing you know, you have surpassed what was true about the relationship and lived into the attachment of your idea. The other person may have no idea about until the unspoken agreement that they didn't actually have with you. It's a self-imposed agreement. Now they've broken it in a way that they're present to the break. Right. Like, well, we never discussed this, or we discussed this like Meatloaf song, "Paradise by Dashboard's Light." We discussed it, but it was under duress and it was hormonal hostage negotiations. But I promised everything to you. Now there's an understandable reason why people want a commitment from that, because if the outcome of it is on a genetic level is that you end up getting the person pregnant, then that person's predating, the ability and the understanding of like being able to do things about it or something, plan B or whatever, superseding that, surpassing it. And I've got to stop using superseding so much.
That's okay. You're superseding the word, Yeah,
exactly. but you're in the process of surpassing the time frame. So you go back to our ancestral calling. Of course, the person that you've just shared the sexual intimacy with is going to want to safeguard their opportunities. Is in our ancestry, especially if you go back far enough, if the man isn't present to defend and to help hunt and gather when she is like the female or the woman is going through, later stages of her pregnancy, and then childbirth, there's almost no other time that a woman is more defenseless than giving birth, right? They're drained physically. They have a child now that they need to protect. They need to have that person there. So it's understandable why current times we have that need that the other person produce a safety process, a safety opportunity, or a genetic safety agreement.
Right.
And then we have we're not in that time anymore. We can go down to Walgreens or CVS, or, we have safety nets that other people will help if I don't want to be that person. So we have these complex thoughts that overlap it. But what we do is we can stifle our growth because we stop at that moment and say, I'm not going to pursue this relationship further, but your idea is that we do. And you're in that cycle of, oh, I'm attached to this and I have fantasized over the future we'll have. And now you're telling me you don't want to be a part of that. And the 12-year-old you says, well, relationships are a sham and I'm in so much pain. I don't want to pursue this again. And then you're like, you know what? I'm just going to have less meaningful relationships moving forward, or less emotional relationships forward. And then you get into somebody blindsides you, and you are now you've been transported. One, you go into the wondrous land of emotional make-believe or fantasy, and it's a fun place to be, but you've denied yourself for a decade or more. And you're like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm a little cautious, but you get swept away in it. You're drunk on it, right? And then,
Exactly.
but you're occupying and functioning at a 12-year-old level at certain areas of rationale. So as
Man,
soon as that person,
spot on.
as
Spot
soon as
on,
that
dude.
person brain,
And
like,
dude,
shit,
it's crazy.
now I
It's
can
crazy.
only occupy a 12-year-old's ability to rationalize because I'm transported back there. So
Man, I tell you, it's a, I'm sorry I'm so eager to interrupt at this
no,
moment, but it was such a powerful thing to say because I spent my entire life looking at what dysfunctional relationships looked like, high and wide, high and wide. Like I can name you off the like 10 people off the top of my head where I saw something that was just like, what the hell, man? And there's one common factor that seems to get in the way the most, it seems like, that I've witnessed over and over and over, is someone doesn't want to sacrifice an aspect of themselves. And what that means is there's an attachment to the self to begin with, you know? And I've seen it so much times, so much pride on both sides. And like I watched one of your episodes about slam dunking on each other. And I'm so conscious of that now. I'm just like, am I slam dunking on my girlfriend right now? You know?
yeah,
And I've even brought it up in conversation and I've been like, sorry, I didn't mean to like slam dunk on you in like a literal sense. I'm sorry if I did that subconsciously. So I grew up seeing it so much that I am equipped with knowing what dysfunction looked like my entire life growing up, especially with my parents divorcing, you know? So now I'm presented with this opportunity to not attach myself to the person that I am right now and to be molded and changed and refined, you know? And it is shitty. It's shitty. It's not fun. And the thing is like when you get into the process of refinement in your life, it's not supposed to be fun.
yeah.
And if you're looking for fun, by all means, don't go and embark on this journey. But I tell you what, once you do, it's the most painful process in the world because what you're going to do is you're going to be detaching yourself from ideas of yourself over and over and over and over and over again.
Mhm. Yeah, you have to have certain traits of neuroticism in order to pursue that level of self-actualization and almost like self-flagellance. You know, it's like you're beating yourself to death to try to emerge of like the phoenix, right? It's
Right,
you have to burn yourself to ash in order
right.
to emerge this different thing. Now, it I think it's a fascinating journey. Now, I don't mean like you have to have levels of neuroticism as if you're neurotic, right? Or
Sure,
clinically
sure.
neurotic, right?
No, I'm with you.
It's all spectrum based. You know, narcissism has a spectrum before you get to the level of being narcissistic enough to be classified.
Right.
Clinically as a narcissist, but we all have areas that we exhibit some of those traits at times in our life. Not always.
I agree.
So, which is a great place to segue into the ego portions. Because it does take something to really understand who you are. But there's phases, and this is what I've taught quite a few people, and I've explored consistently. But I put the ego in an evolutionary perspective. If you look into neuroscience and even the psychology, sociology, and you get into the structure of the brain, you find out that we have different phases of development. They'll have the reptilian brain, the mammalian, and then the prefrontal cortex, which is the defining difference between us and our ape relatives.
Yeah.
And that's just where we're at currently. Doesn't mean we won't find that out later. We just have a much larger prefrontal cortex, in well matured. Especially, now, the interesting thing about the human body is the hardware isn't even there until you get to 24 to 26, roughly speaking, on the prefrontal cortex ability to be in function. Because other than that, it's irrational and emotional predominant thinking before you get into the calculated and rational portion of the thinking process, and that's marked at 24 to 26 years of age.
Interesting. Would that be just a quick question? Would that be for males and females, or just?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
They find that females typically will mature a little bit faster in certain areas, but boys also have a different.
Makes sense. Makes total sense.
But it's not that women always outpace men. Women outpace men in certain marked areas, and men outpace women in certain marked areas.
Absolutely.
So the prefrontal cortex is the portion that we do use to make adult rational decisions. That's also why I'm against lowering the voting age from 18 to 16. As it's easy to emotionally manipulate somebody if they're not even that much closer to rational thinking. They're more
that makes sense.
To a rational judgment, which is more likely that you'll get the vote you want by emotionally manipulating them. So
right.
I'm not a big fan of that. So I'd rather actually see the voting age go the other direction. Really, I'd like to see it get to 21 personally, but then again, I mean, there's other things to argue and explore deeper into the thought with other people.
Sure.
Not necessarily
I agree.
call now. But when you get into the ego, so many people define the ego as if it is this scapegoat type of persona that we give ourselves a ticket of forgiveness and we push that ticket of forgiveness off onto the other person. You're like, I'm really sorry. You know, it's like, it's a half-ass apology. I'm really sorry about what happened. You know what? That was just my ego getting in the way. And when people accept it, it's like, I just got a ticket or a check I could write on again. When these behaviors show up again, I'm sorry, it's my ego. Now, it's not like it has a permanency that you'll always be able to resort to it, because at some point in time, they expect you to overcome it. But it seems like this soft forgiveness, or it may be a total forgiveness, but it's like you're asking for a soft forgiveness, hoping for a major one. Kind of like sharing food with somebody, and you're like, would you like a bite? And deep down inside, you're like, I don't want you to have a bite, but nice. You know, you're like, would you like a bite? And then it's like, now I really don't want you to take it. And as soon as they say, yeah, I do want it, and you're like, son of a bitch. all right. I got enough. I got more than enough. You know, it's thing that we do when we play this game. So the ego has the reptilian, the mammalian, and the human portion, the spiritual level, if you will, the one that actually understands long-term consequences of behavior and reward, more so than the reptilian, which observe nature. The reptilian brain is more, in the reptilian ego is usually what we'll resort back to if we've outgrown it because of life crises. You know, a health factor, someplace you become imbalanced and you resort back to survival. So that's your survival mechanism for self is at that
right,
which is the one that's more prone to lying. It's the one that's more prone to selfish behavior. That would be, everybody else will pay the cost. I will not pay the cost here. I need the reward, which is that reptilian behavior. The mammalian is that point where it's where you have your group of people. You'll defend other people in your group whenever you feel like they're being attacked. Sorry, it's Athena.
No, you're fine. I have a dog behind me too, and I just looked over your shoulder and saw his sweet dog face, and I'm like, I feel you, dude. I understand.
He's crying in the background. I don't know if you guys can hear it, so give me 1 second. Let me run around.
There you go, boy. He's a good boy. Good girl. Good boy.
Okay. Come back. All right, so the mammalian ego is one that does like to create hierarchy behaviors. It is an introduction into the hierarchy concepts where you do create placement of, managers. You'll create all kinds of things that have to do with hierarchy. Where you are dependable and where you require something. So the mammalian portion of the ego is one that does actually want to share with others, but it is tribally sound. It's tribally based. So it is, I want you to survive because I depend on you for my survival. And I'm no longer at that stage where I just need to worry about me. I now worry about me plus you. So
Right.
it's more what you would see inside of a lot of different packs of animals that do live in the group-based hierarchical type of thing. So that would be the ego's mammalian stage.
Mammalian. Gotcha.
Mammalian.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then there is the spiritual portion, or what we would refer to as being the human portion of the ego, or the enlightened version of the ego. And that's one that would look at the same as somebody who has practiced something to a degree of mastery, and then you witness a child attempting their first or early stages of practice, and you look at it with that sense of endearment and that sense of joy that they're discovering something about themselves. And that's the ego that has the higher level, which is where they say like vibrates at a higher frequency, those kind of things. I live more in the sciences and the evolutionary concepts of it. So with that, that's more of where I'm at with the ego portions. Now, every single one of these, even if you do, this is also why you will see people that I mentioned earlier, the relationship thing, you're 36 years old and somebody breaks your heart, right? You find out your partner's been cheating on you, or having an affair. They betray you in some way. And now you've reverted back to, you're thinking of ways of getting your pound of flesh. Now, that's where you're emotionally imbalanced in such a way that even if you resonated at a higher level, this is why we see people that are well developed that fall, and then all of a sudden we're like, this person's likely been pretending this entire time.
Sure.
It is not that they've been pretending. They just
Right.
had an area they were not developed in, and they had a reliance on somebody else that had them feel safe and secure to explore that area of their life, or they've built more of their life on top of a pillar that is not a permanent pillar.
Right. Right.
When a person pulls away, it could be, I've financially been dependent on you stabilizing us by keeping the books, or maybe you make more money than I do and I've been exploring business opportunities, but you still have this, your higher resignation, you're resonating at a higher level, and then you have that person disappear on you. And then it's like, now you have the dependency that you've developed off of that person on top of the emotional upset. And now it's no longer just, I need my pound of flesh. I need 10, 15, or 20 pounds of flesh. I need
Right. Yeah.
revenge. No longer do I need to feel justified. I need to go the next step. I need to harm
Right.
in some way. And that's where you go from having that, you're at that higher level vibration and frequency, the higher ego, and you drop all the way down to the reptilian behaviors. It's all about me. And that's why we get that, where we look at the person and go, I think you may have conned me. And you feel like a level of distrust has occurred because you've witnessed somebody go through that. So really,
Right.
thing about us as human beings, but that's my generic and probably butchered overview of the ego in its three stages, but it gives more privilege. So like, say, God forbid you come down with a very critical illness. You need to put your focus back on your health and well-being. You really aren't going to do yourself a whole lot of justice, or do a whole lot of good for yourself if you need to go to get, treatment, and instead you decide to forego that and go to the soup kitchen. You need to take care of yourself. And
Right.
that's why you will have that. There's a reason behind the desired shift to go back to do what you need to for that. It's just up to you to be able to develop yourself out of it as you repair your health. If your health is the issue, it may be finances and you've had a bankruptcy and you've lost the mansion,
Sure.
like a lot of professional sports athletes.
Shows up in different ways, whether it's health or relationships or
Yeah.
self-destructive habits of some sort,
Yeah. And the coping mechanisms usually fall into self-destructive habits, right? Which a coping mechanism may be, if you want to go out into the bar and get drunk, doing it once, twice, or doing it for a month, or hell, even if you have to go for a full year, you're doing that because you're neglecting growth, but you may need to do that as your therapy to help you balance out enough to know that you care about yourself. Or maybe you use, in that scenario, you likely use alcohol as a coping mechanism that lowers your inhibitions so that you can speak or even dare to visit thoughts that you won't
Right.
allow yourself to visit out of the idea of your higher self. Like, I can't think anger right now, but you feel that you have to.
Right.
Your higher self is almost like you're either chastising yourself because you can't stay in that higher self position,
Yeah, exactly.
or you're looking from that higher self position going, I can't go down that route. And then alcohol lowers the inhibitions. And before you know it, you're there and you feel vindicated. Finally, you
Yeah.
flutter
Yeah,
to yourself as you get your next shot, drop
it's
kick,
true. And, and this is why I'm extremely grateful uh, for my partner, because it's almost like suppressing your emotions in a sense. Uh, I mean, there's two ways of doing it. There's two ways of going down this route. You can suppress your emotions, and hopefully you have somebody in your life that can refine parts of yourself, like empathy or recognizing that you're experiencing emotions, or you're in a part in your life where, like you were saying, where you're coping and you drink, and then eventually you drink enough to where you start recognizing these emotions and these walls start falling down and you're a total mess. And I I remember specifically, my dad passed away about a year ago, about a month ago, uh, last year. And I was doing fine all day. I was like, okay, I've made up my mind how I'm going to cope and how I'm going to grieve and how I'm going to look at the situation. And I'm thankful this happened. I really am. And my girlfriend looked at me with her big, beautiful eyes, which usually melt the core of me. And she says, hey, are you doing okay? And then I had realized that I was suppressing emotions and wasn't even aware of it. And then I was like, I felt my heart all of a sudden, and I was like, oh shit, I don't know if I am. I don't know if I am actually. And I really found myself cathartically just grieving, you know. And afterwards, I was right back to myself, and I felt fine.
Yeah.
And there's a stigma that if you're a man and you experience emotions and you cry about them, that you're less of a man.
Mhm.
You can actually strategically be more effective in your life and your relationships and your business if you take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc.
Yeah.
And I think that suppressing your emotions is important in certain scenarios, but I wouldn't say that when you're at home where you want to practice vulnerability to some extent. you know um do I think you should cry when you're on a sales call? No. Do I think you should cry when you're trying to empower someone into like influencing them in the right direction? Maybe not. Maybe not. But there's a give and a take, and I've I'm figuring out as I go along. That's all.
Yeah, but that's life, and that's a beautiful thing about it. It's like
Yeah.
we will deny ourselves the experience of life if we have too strong of an attachment to something, when that something is not present. And then we spend all of this time navigating, coming up with solutions to challenges that show up, but it's all built on a foundation of something that you're not even there yet. So we'll spend all of this time thinking that's the thing that I need to be with in order, or that's the thing I need to accomplish to give my life value.
Right.
And we omit value on a daily basis. It's what comes to mind is, as you're like, okay, well, when should you cry? That's part of emotional maturity. And it's true. There is a stigma. There is this stereotype about men.
Yeah.
A girl can cry and people will coddle her. A guy can cry and he's going to be looked at as if he's lesser or weak. You know,
Yeah.
we see this stuff played out constantly. You could have two people drinking, a guy and a girl, equal age, drinking. They end up fooling around. And then the next day, she's like, I don't know what happened. And everybody says, well, then he's wrong. So but that has to do with the biasness that we have. It's like
Hmm.
you need to have extra degrees of responsibility that other people or the other gender does not require. And it's not, I mean, there are other things. There's an exchange value, right? Because there's going to be areas that people put their harder on women over than they are men. But what we
Absolutely.
see is that has got its way into a legal position.
Yeah.
So but there are things to look into. It's not really the time that I don't want to go too far into that in this.
Sure. Sure. No, I respect that. I think we all know what we're getting at here with
Yeah,
that, and yeah, you're right though. We're all in some scenario, in some case or not, in a small percentage of a way, victim to society's standards, and you can break out of that. You can break out of that.
absolutely. What people say you should meditate. What comes out of meditation? And the real answer to that is what you need to work on.
Right. Yeah.
Now,
It's not like the one size fits all. Like
no,
it brings you clarity,
yeah,
like it's different for everybody.
that's also the thing. Like I've taught meditation in many different forms, but what I've always taught about meditation is don't interrupt your thoughts. Seek clarity. Oh, because a lot of
Right.
people get the thoughts out, push them out, act like they're not there. Eckhart totally goes through his own meditative practices, if you've ever followed any of his work. And there's really not a right way of doing it. But I'm getting to here is that it's the same thing for self-development. Guys need to cry. We need to. It's an
Yeah.
expression that human beings have. We have
Right.
it for a reason, and we have societal pressures that say we shouldn't. It's the same
Right.
as I go over the 8 different areas of maturity. You need to
Hmm.
take care of your physical body. If you don't, you don't already have a genetic reason for the body to give out, your body will give out prematurely if you don't take care of it. For example,
Absolutely.
the,
Let's look at it on a very simple way. Like, uh, uh, you know, I'm not going to say names or relationships. Some people with anxiety, for me, I get anxiety when I'm suppressing my emotions.
Mhm.
I'll know it. I'll know it. I'm like, oh crap, why am I experiencing anxiety? Maybe there's some emotions that I'm trapping through societal standards and subconscious habits. And
Mhm.
then I'll say, am I okay, man? Is there something that I really deep down just need to let out so I can move forward and feel fine?
Yeah,
And oftentimes I'm not even aware of it until like, I'm having a conversation with my partner about it, but you know, it's great that two men can get into a conversation that can say these things because it's extremely important, man. Like it's extremely important. It doesn't make you less of a man, you know?
mhm.
I think one of the most reaffirming things that I could have ever heard is, there's been times where I have brought myself down to a certain person's level to experience what they're going through, and I find myself crying, and that is called empathy. And this said person would say, hey, just so you know, I do not think of you less as a man because you cried. In fact, I've seen you cry and just carry on like you normally would if you weren't going to cry ever.
Mhm.
Like, and bounce back stronger because you're doing that. Like I can literally be 100% on, cry, and then be right back on to 100% on and be like, all right, let's keep it moving. Let's do this thing. And I think more men should explore that thought process so that we don't find ourselves physically or mentally ill.
I agree. It's what I find that is common is that everyone wants to be their most potent self. Now, the issue with being your most potent self is you need to be present. So it's like studying anything. You go online or you go to class or whatever it is, and you're studying something. If you're not present, you don't maintain the information. You don't retain
Right.
it. And what I meant was retain it. You may not even absorb it. You may be cueing yourself off of specific verbiage that reminds you so you pass the test, but you don't have functional knowledge in that way. It's you when you work out, are you better at exercise and get more results if you're present versus loaded up on caffeine and distant yourself, right? Like if you want maximum muscle recruitment per every given thing you do, you will achieve that faster through being present than to listen to whatever the latest cool music is.
Yeah.
It's like be present to the moment. Are you a better lover if you're present with your partner versus telling yourself you're a great lover? Right? It's like
Right.
there's the emotion, like so the 8 different areas of maturity, and you may or may not have seen my work on that yet, but you have the physical body, you have the community, you have your cognitive portions, which is the brain development and education pieces. You'll have your emotions, which we all go through that. You get finance, you have business, you have sexuality, and you have spirituality. Those are the 8 areas. Now, the thing is that most of the time we want to be really good in one area, and then the other area is trying to drag us down by us not being prepared to deal with it when it shows up, and we try to muscle our way through whatever it is that we're dealing with. And then we end up with this, I have a hammer, it works on everything. And
Yeah.
we lose it. We're like, okay, well, we have a surgeon that wants to use a hammer on us versus a scalpel. Or
Right. Yeah.
it's effective,
A
right?
good point. But
You
I've done this surgery with hammer before, you know?
yeah. Could you imagine sitting there and you're talking to your financial advisor and all you see is that they're over there just kind of giving themselves a little flex, and they're like, yeah, they're squeezing this thing, and then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, what were we saying? Like I'm
You
talking
know,
about
that's a
the
funny way of looking at it. If I had a surgeon, I'd probably pick the like really calm, like, you know, guy that's not extremely bulked out,
yeah.
heavy-handed.
Well, it's an interesting thing is that everybody wants to act like having the highest test scores makes them a better person.
Right.
When you go to get your surgeon, you don't know where they graduated in their class. Usually you
Yeah.
might find out that they graduated from a specific university, but not really where they placed in their class. So it's a fascinating thing, but what we do is that we make it that we want a specialist for everything that we get involved with. And we expect that specialist to be so well-rounded in any type of situation, they can think their way through all issues. If you're talking to a financial advisor, do you talk to your financial advisor about risk factors in investing your money? You may have somebody who's so front end focused. This is what this stock has done. This is what this stock has done, but they don't have the back end focus to look at how that stock does under certain criteria. Pandemic, under it's done well because maybe the lumber industry in that area has produced a degree of financial influence that affects the company that we're talking about now. That's not direct, but indirect. Now, a lot of times it's like if you don't have that level of presence about you and you're fantasizing about the way your future is going to look out of a good investment plan or portfolio, you may be like, oh, you're the expert, I trust you. And you just trusted 30 years of your life or more with that person, but you're so damn caught up in your own mind that you won't even consider if that person is truly well fit for you.
Sure.
Because we're not trying to understand the total element about somebody. We're just
Yeah.
looking at where they're an expert. Who's
Yeah.
the person doesn't have a drug habit, and they're like, yeah, this is great return, but they get a fast, higher commission and they don't care if your money's lost. You just don't know, but you go off of likability.
Yeah.
Eye contact.
Likability is hardly is a very tip of the iceberg of what you're going to get. It's kind of like hiring a personal trainer. It's like, oh, well, he was like really charismatic and like he had big muscles and like, and it's like, I've helped out so many people being the person that's just like, listen, like you may not lose 40 pounds and you may not gain 50 pounds of muscle, but you will change your lifestyle. You will change your lifestyle. And if you change your lifestyle, you will eventually get there because you've changed your lifestyle. And I sold a lot of personal training, and that was a genuine thing. And I was able to help out a lot of people because of that, you know? And I've seen it all the time where there's a bodybuilder. It's like everybody needs the same thing. And it's like, what? Oh my God. It's like, and I'm hardly buff, you know, and I'm in good shape. I'm fit. You know, I could run up a mountain quicker than a bodybuilder could probably, you know. There's no comparison. There's different levels of fitness, but
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes what's presented to us isn't always the case. And sometimes it's just jaded by charisma. And that's also another thing that is extremely up for discussion and refinement, is being charismatic uh, helpful, or is being genuine helpful? And what you find is that being genuine is just as sellable as being charismatic, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Well, you could also argue and say that in order to be charismatic, you have to be genuine. So
Fair.
to
Yeah.
varying degrees, you know, you don't
Yeah.
have to be completely sincere. You can be genuinely present with the person, but your ends is not the same as theirs.
Right.
And you're likable. So there's a lot of things that what we do is we superficially assess the either the word or its role in our life or some sort of character definition, and then we're like, well, you know, I'm known for being this. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, to be able to really get a good grasp for what this is when they say I'm known for this, is you really need to connect with the person. Perhaps they're describing themselves in such a way that is actually an injustice to them, but no one has taken the time to get to know them well enough to say, these are other attributes about you. You know, it's an interesting practice, and this is something I encourage you and everybody who watches this to do,
Absolutely.
is ask people in their life who you are to them, and don't bait anything.
Right.
You can open the conversation with, I want you to tell me, like, honestly and as sincere as you possibly can be. Don't worry about hurting my feelings.
Yeah.
I want to know who I am to you. And if they're struggling with that, you can ask them questions about, well, what can you depend on me for? What do
Right.
you know you cannot depend on me for? Oh, what attributes about me stand out in such a way that if you had to tell somebody else about me and I'm not present, that would make you feel like you've got a good description of me?
Right.
Have them tell you. It is likely going to shock the hell out of you to find out what
Yeah.
they think about you. You know, some people may move you to tears, like still to this day, when I hear that I've made a difference for somebody else, whether it's just in a general conversation, like, I'm sorry if I just dunked on you. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
knowing that you made a difference to somebody else can, like, for me, can still move me to tears.
It's incredible feeling to know that you've been able to, like, change somebody for the better, and or to at least be a light to them, for them, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that that's where, I think that's why we cross paths in our life, is because we both found joy and pleasure in that. And you know, it's funny, man. I've always respected you, you know, and it was because of your, just the way that to carry yourself is very genuine, interested, and curious. You're a very curious person. And I remember a long time ago, I think I just gotten off probation. The last time we saw each other was like maybe like 8 years ago. I don't know, maybe like five.
It's fun.
You know, so it felt like 10 years ago.
Yeah. Lots
So
happened.
much. Yeah, so lots happened. So 5 years ago, I remember uh, I was having a conversation, something along the lines of, well, why do you personal train, Will? And it was something along the lines of, and I said something very like silly that I look back on, that I was just saying out of like, I have no idea. But you're like, I was like, I feel like I have a debt that I owe to society, and you know, maybe that might have been true subconsciously, definitely not consciously. But I was doing it because it really felt good to help people when my whole life I always felt like I was helpless, and that helping people, being able to effectively help people was like my ticket out of the dark, you know? And that was just the most empowering thing for two people to get together and say, we're going to move some mountains or maybe some hills or maybe some ant hills, but we're going to move something
Mm-hmm.
together forward. And, I remember that we were sitting in the break room and we had that conversation. And ever since then, I laugh about that. And I'm just like, and I just remember the conversation and everything. It was a really good conversation, and, ever since then, we worked together, but I remembered you specifically after that conversation because you wanted to actually dive into the conversation and you were curious, like, well, what does that mean to you, And I'd never been like, nobody's ever been that curious and what I meant by that. So I was like, wait a minute, I don't know if I even meant that.
Hey, it's one of the disruptors that like you can use to really genuinely get to know somebody.
Yeah.
I do it like in the pleasantries of the day when you're like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm doing all right. And I'm like, yeah, well, tell me about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
or you get we're gonna have to close this up too because I've got my dog outside barking.
Absolutely. My dog's behind me.
But yeah, the other is like when somebody's like, I love doing this to people. They're like, I was like, oh, excuse me. And they're like, oh, no, you're fine. And they're like, oh, thank you. I didn't know you felt that way about me. That's sweet. I was not expecting a compliment. And
Yeah.
it's a cheeky thing, but what it does is it makes somebody become present to the moment.
Exactly.
And from there, it's either, okay, well, that was cheeky, or it could be an opening to more conversation to just get to know somebody else at another level. The other
Absolutely.
one, the other one that I give is when somebody's like, well, I can't complain. Even if I did, who'd want to hear it? And I'm like, wait, stop there. The person two different type of people want to hear you complain. One is somebody who wants to know your life is probably worse than theirs, so they feel better about themselves.
Right.
Or the other is the person that actually knows how to get you out of what you're dealing with.
Precisely. I agree 100%. It's so funny. It's like, I'll say this. This has been a very valuable thing. And I think it could be helpful for a lot of people in relationships. If your partner is complaining or venting, ask them 3 simple questions. Are you venting? Do you want advice? Or are you hungry?
It's excellent, by the way. Like 100%, dude. It's such a powerful thing to recognize, because if you give advice when somebody's venting, they're gonna feel like you just betrayed or you just gave unsolicited advice, even though you
Yep.
spent 30 minutes listening to their complaint. So the other is, like obviously if they want feedback and you assume that they're venting and you're
Yeah.
like how deflating does it feel when you give somebody the look back and you're like,
It's depressing.
and the other person's like, oh, I thought you just wanted to get it out. It's like, no,
Yeah.
and then there's are you hungry?
Yeah. A lot of times it's the third one. And
Yeah.
no, a lot of times sometimes someone just wants to vent,
Yeah.
and that's okay. If someone wants to vent to me, I'm totally cool with that. I have to really bite my tongue because I feel like I'm like, oh, I've been through that, but it's just like, yeah, I hear what you're going through, and if you ever want advice, I'm here for you. Boom.
Yeah.
Period. And you'll find oftentimes that people will if you leave someone with space like that, they'll ask you at some point.
Yeah. If
And you can
if
actually help somebody.
if you start it that way, they know that you care enough, and then they won't look at it as unsolicited advice. I do that often, by the way. I actually don't ask people if they're hungry, which I like that though. I definitely got to add that in.
it either adds it adds an element of like comedic relief. So
Yeah, and also it's possibly true, and it's probably likely.
Yeah.
But I do like to ask that because it shows genuine care. It's like,
Hmm.
with this, do you want to just vent, or do you want to vent and then get like some sort of insight from my perspective? Yeah.
Sure.
And it may have them go, well, originally I wanted to vent, but now I know you care enough to listen all the way through. And that
Right.
now that you've asked, yeah, I'm open to it, which is most often what I get, which is, yeah, I absolutely would like some feedback, you know? So, but with that, William, we can definitely do this more than once. Chat
Happy to.
intended that, it's to catch us in the journey of life. And I have just heard so many times from people that they really would like to be able to listen to these kind of conversations. Whenever I have them with somebody, it's like, I wish I could have these conversations more often.
Yeah.
And that's what this whole thing is. It's like, how can we make a change in the world? We're not trying to produce this overly refined product that would be like a university would produce, at a,
Yeah.
a price. It's more of, we're all going through this living process, and some of us have packaged the life that we've had, the experiences that we've had in such a way that inspire others, and also they may be able to buy into it, whatever it is, to support the journey. So they see, maybe you would be the champion of somebody else's life. They're paying attention to you. You're the celebrity that they're trying to model themselves by. And it's because you're also a real person. You're not the celebrity of Hollywood.
You're a relatable person.
But that's you too, right? It's like, it's all
Yeah.
of, and that's the intention of the show. And with this segment of the show is to bring that out for us,
Yeah.
so that we can have and love the journey we're on and be present to that journey. So,
That's beautiful. And I love that you are creating a platform to create a community that people can tune in and listen and not feel like they are, it feels genuine. And it's like, hey, my name is Chad. I'm an ordinary guy, and I have some conversations that would be extremely important, And with that, people are going to be a lot more attuned to listening.
yeah.
Hell, even me, I haven't listened to a podcast in a while. The last podcast I listened to was a thing that I listened to from you, because I felt like I was just like, yeah, this feels genuine. I'm going to listen, Like,
Yeah.
it feels genuine, and I'm happy you're still doing it after 5 years too. And I love the sticker back there.
Oh, you like my, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That
a
was a
gift from an
free.
ex. But it's Christian Bale in the movie American Psycho. It's one of my favorite movies, but it's because
Recommend.
it's psychologically stimulating.
Absolutely.
And that's why I like the movie, not a worry that I'm going to be Dexter or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is, it's funny, but yeah.
Well, William, I'm going to have to let you go because I can hear Athena's still having herself a good time outside and somebody shooting fireworks. She does
Yeah.
this. She lives for me.
Yeah, we'll do this again, man. Happy to do it.
Is there anything in closing that you'd like to throw out there, or any way of people being able to like track you down or anything like that?
I'm not trying to be tracked down. I just want whoever's listening to this to keep an open mind and understand that, like, things can be different.
Mm-hmm.
Things can be different, period, if you decide that they will be different for yourself. And, don't let whatever your narrative was in the past dictate where you are and where you're going, and have fun. And that's it,
Yeah. Make life the journey, right? And the journey means that, it's not always going to be fun. It's not always going to be not fun.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot of different experiences, and forgive yourself while you go through it.
Boom. That well said. That's it.
Yes, and thank you. So, I'm honored that you came on with me. I'm honored that you spent this time, and that you would like to revisit this in time too. So, if I do have any questions that come up that come from this video, I'll make sure that you and I do talk about it, or any comments or anything like that. Just make sure you are subscribed to the Growing Up the Wilds of Suburbia channel on YouTube, so that if there's any comments, you'll be able to at least see some stuff on there.
Absolutely. No, and I will. And whoever's watching this, you should subscribe to Chad too, because Chad is a very curious individual. And if you come across anybody who is as curious as Chad, you will learn a thing or two if you keep an open mind.
Thank you. Wow, that's extremely generous. Well, and thank you for that, William. Well, with that, again, thank you for your time on the show. I'm going to go ahead and close it up now. So again, this is Chad Everett Broshears. I am the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, and also the host, thanks to Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, to do this particular segment, which is Chat with Chad. And today it was Chat with Chad and Will. That I'll give you a call back in just a second, or at least some messages. Once I end this, it's going to drop everything. Okay.
Sounds good, man.
Share this video with the people in your life that you know will benefit from it. It's an opportunity to really break for freedom. We are all in this together. Will and I are in this together. We want to see the world become the thing that we can all look at and say, we are all happy to be here and to know that we did a part to make it this way. So with that, again, I appreciate everybody's time for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day.